Time to introduce the leader according to this. My name is Kenneth. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And I like to say that I'm only sober by God's grace and His mercy. I'm not stupid enough or dumb enough to think I'm sober on my own power. This is a workshop, and the title of this workshop, the topic is Transformational Personality Change via the steps, through the steps. Now my hope is that everybody can benefit, or my hope is that the results from the meeting, from our talk and our presentation, will result in having a better understanding, a better comprehension, and a better appreciation for the books that we have been given, the textbooks of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12. That's the whole purpose of it. You know, the second part of the flyer says a progression in understanding. Now we come up with this term. Transformational personality change via the steps. And some people would think that's some highfalutin language. You know, this word, transformational, it simply means, it's really big book language, but it simply means of or dealing with transformation or transformation. It's simply dealing with that. That's all it's talking about. And in this sense, this transformation we're talking about is in accordance with our so-called spiritual awakening, or our entire psychic change, or our religious experience, or our God consciousness. You know, and early in recovery, people had those things confused. So what we want to do is look at how the big book actually cleared up the confusion and set the matter where it's supposed to be by turning to the appendix 2, the spiritual experience, on page, it's in the back of the book. Y'all know what the spiritual experience at the book? 567, I think, or 57?
567.
567. That's what we need to go at, to get a better understanding of what they're talking about. Now, some people say spiritual awakening, God consciousness, psychic change, religious experience, spiritual experience. And lately, in the rooms, the person with the atheistic agnostic tendencies, they call it the aha moment. Y'all ever heard of that? People use that word? Oh, I had my aha moment. Like, it's, you know, it's derogatory, really, to me. It sounds derogatory. Anyway, it cleared it up on page 567. Y'all got that? All right. This is just clearing this. We're going to need a big book and a 12 and 12. Y'all got 12 and 12?
No.
We'll need some 12 and 12 without doubt.
Where they
This week. They locked up?
Oh, no.
Yeah, Emily just put them back in from the last meeting. I was here. Anybody got keys?
I do.
Having a big book and a 12 and 12 is necessary.
Need the tools first.
Yeah, we're going to have to have that.
I sure can. You got one before? You want one? Oh, thank you. Who needs one? You all need this one too?
All right.
Got one?
I bring my own.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
My sponsor told me.
This is what the book says as a result of people having a misunderstanding of what was really meant. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading,
What page is that, Ken?
that's page 567
In what book?
in the big book. It's all the way in the back in the spiritual experience in the 4th edition. They say those terms are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading. And it emphasizes careful reading. Shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many forms. So this transformational thing we're talking about, the way they're telling us it is the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first print gave many readers the impression that these personality changes has manifested itself, or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. And some people have went out because they didn't see that.
Yeah.
Or they didn't get that and they thought they couldn't do it. And they complain. You know, some people in the rooms, even up to the present day, I've heard people saying, when am I going to have my spiritual awakening? When am I going to get mine? Y'all ever heard that?
Yeah.
So they're clearing it up. They say in the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, which is coming back to this word right here, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James called the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration, another change, in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. Now, in telling us what they're telling us, they say it is true that our first print gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experience must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Now, I went to the first print to see where these things took place. Where in the first print did they describe these things, these are sudden and spectacular upheavals? I went into the book to find out what they was talking about, because it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to back it up. And I came up with examples of what they had sudden and spectacular upheavals. One is on page 11 in the big book. Everybody got a big book? You say, but my friend, y'all see that? Yeah. But my friend sat before me, and he made a point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead. Suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. That's one example of how that printing, the first printing, could give the reader the idea that these things must take place in sudden and spectacular upheavals. Another one is on page 14. Y'all see what these were revolutionary? He said these were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though the great clean wind of a mountain blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. That's another spectacular upheaval, another example of that. Again, on page 27. I think it's 27. And this, a lot of people use this one too. Page 27. Roland Hazard. He was talking to the doctor, and the doctor was telling him that he was hopeless. So he asked the doctor, when he said to the doctor, is there no exception? Y'all see that? Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena, meaning he don't understand them at all. But he knows people have had them. He said they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side. We're talking about the sudden and spectacular upheaval, right? They're suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Then he had the nerve to tell him, in fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employ are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. That's what he's telling him. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. Most people associate spirituality with their religion when they come in here, right or wrong. Right. That's automatically what they do. He said this hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, they weren't just good, they were very good. In his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Now, this is key. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. That's another example of a person getting an experience right off the bat. Page 50. Where they say we start at here 1,000. Y'all see that here 1,000 on page 50 at the bottom? Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. That could be taken either way. It could be taken by some to believe soon after, dismissing the few simple requirements. You heard? So that's why they say the first written gave the impression that these things, everybody had to have that. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. when many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith, especially if those people are agnostics and atheists. Because this takes place and we're agnostics, right? Here they say thousands of people, worldly indeed, they ain't got no spirituality at all. And all of a sudden coming up to this program, they done took a few simple requirements. Now they're telling us about God. To be honest, you know, I've learned more about God from we agnostics than hardly any other chapter in this book. I'm grateful to, that's why I never ever discredit the agnostic. You know, the agnostics and the atheists are some of the most intelligent people on the face of this planet. If you listen to an atheist long enough, he'll have you thinking they ain't got no God. That's how smart he is. So, and of course, the other example in the back of the book is the man on the bed.
What's that?
Let me see.
Number 3, story last time.
Yes, number 3. I forget the page number. I had it written down somewhere and I don't want to waste time looking for it. So y'all got to help me with this. What page is that on? It's in A Vision for You.
Vision for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I got it.
You still ain't said what that.
It's on page, it starts on page 157. Y'all see it? 2 days later?
157?
Page 157. 157.
Yeah.
Now, this picture goes all around the world. It says, pay attention to the time. He starts off with 2 days later. Y'all see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
A future fellow of Alcoholics Anonymous stared glassily at the strangers beside his bed. He's looking up at Bill and Bob. He's in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
He said, who are you fellas and why this private room? I was always in a ward before. Said one of the visitors, we're giving you a treatment for alcoholism. Not them.
Yeah.
We giving you a treatment for alcoholism because whatever they've been giving you ain't been working. That's what they're telling you. That's the words they're using. Hopelessness was written large on the man's face as he replied, oh, but that's no use. Nothing would fix me. I'm a goner. The last 3 times I got drunk on the way home from here. I'm afraid to go out the door. I can't understand it. He's admitting he can't, with all of his knowledge, he can't understand it. For an hour, remember the time. For an hour, the 2 friends, Bill and Bob. Y'all remember the picture with the man on the hospital bed?
Yeah.
All right, so he said the 2 friends told him about their drinking experiences. Over and over, he would say, that's me. That's me. I drink like that. Just like when we come in the rooms and we hear people sharing, we say, yeah, that was me too. I don't say it loud, but I say, that was me too. See, the man in the bed was told of the acute poisoning from which he suffered. How it deteriorates the body of an alcoholic and warps his mind. There was much talk about the mental state preceding the first drink. Yeah, that's me, said the sick man. The very image. You fellas know your stuff all right, but I don't see what good it'll do. You fellas are somebody. And Bill and Bob did look like somebody to him.
Yeah.
See, at that time, Bill had 6 months. And Bob had 2 weeks. Bob had 2 weeks sober when he was working on his next alcoholic. Matter of fact, Dr. Bob is the only one with a record of working with over 5,000 alcoholics. Bill didn't have that. They didn't give that record to Bill. They gave that kind of recognition to Bob. It starts off in his nightmare. for an hour. No, where we at? He said,
You fellas or somebody.
yeah, you fellas are somebody. I was once, but I'm a nobody now. And from what you tell me, I know more than ever. I can't stop. They were they were constantly deepening the relentlessness of his dilemma, so that he can reach rock bottom inside. That's what they were, and it worked. He said, at this, both the visitors burst into a laugh. Yeah, they laughed because they knew that it could be done. Said the future fella, the future fella anonymous, damn little laugh about that I can see. Excuse me, man, but that's what the book's saying. That is what it said. Y'all see that, right?
Yeah.
The two friends spoke of their spiritual experience and told him about the course of action they carried out. He interrupted. I used to be strong for the church. Know how he went back to church? The other one went to church too, right? Now this one goes right back to his church experience. But that won't fix it. I prayed to God on hangover mornings and sworn that I'd never touch another drop. But by 9 o'clock I'd be barrel as an hour. That fit a lot of people in here, including me. I'm not talking as though this don't fit me. All right. Next day, remember the time. Next day found the prospect more receptive. He had been thinking it over. Maybe you're right, he said. God ought to be able to do anything. Then he added, he sure didn't do much for me when I was trying to fight this booze racket alone. On the third day, remember the time.
Yeah.
On the third day, the lawyer gave his life to the care and direction of his Creator and said he was perfectly willing to do anything necessary. His wife came, scarcely daring to be hopeful. Though she thought she saw something different about her husband already, he had begun to have a spiritual experience. That afternoon, the time factor. Y'all hearing this?
Yeah.
That afternoon, he put on his clothes and walked from the hospital a free man. Now, the way they put that is, y'all have already seen the man on the bed in the picture, right?
Yeah.
And in religious terminology, people went up to the sick man who couldn't walk. Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
And he said, rise, pick up thy bed and walk. Y'all remember that? And this is, they tell us on the third day, he rose. Y'all heard that? And God, so, that's what they're telling us.
Yeah.
And so they put it in that language because this book is written moral as well as spiritual. So these physical descriptions carry great spiritual connotations behind them. But all of those examples made people think nevertheless that they needed to have and acquire an immediate change. And so they corrected that. So I read that because the book told us that our first printing gave people that impression. So we went and found out in some places, probably more, where they gave that impression at. Now, this personality change that they're talking about, this change, this transformational change, is dealing with personality. I don't know if I wrote that word up here, but it's dealing with personality. Here it is. They didn't say character change. They said personality change. Although the word personality and character is so intrinsically intertwined that it's hard to see where one leaves off from the other. However, one of them is external and one of them is internal. So since the book used personality change, we looked up the word personality to make sure that these people were on track. Personality simply means the totality of an individual's behavioral or emotional tendencies. how I tend to act in a given situation, how I tend to feel in a given situation. That is what has changed largely. My personality remains. It can change, but it remains. My character must be built on. Y'all heard me?
Yeah.
My character is who I really am. Y'all heard what I said?
Yes.
When I present to you all the book called A Stage Character, sometimes they interchange these words, but when I present to you all the personality that I wish that you all perceive of me, my basic character is who and what I really am. So I'm going to need character building. The personality can change, and that's why they use that word. So those smart ones among us wouldn't be able to go in there and find loopholes in it. Like me. Y'all heard? Because that's what I did. But I got locked up. When, the more I did it, the more locked up I came, so I stopped. So we want to look at how they use this word, personality. On page 570, in the medical view, in the big book, page 570. Y'all see Dr. John Stauffer?
Yes, sir.
Dr. John F. Stauffer. Now this is the medical view that was presented to Alcoholics Anonymous. Dr. John F. Stauffer, chief psychiatrist, Philadelphia General Hospital, citing his experience with AA, said, the alcoholics we get here at Philadelphia General are mostly those who cannot afford private treatment. And AA is by far the greatest thing we have been able to offer them. Even among those who occasionally land back in here again, we observe a profound change in personality. You would hardly recognize them.
Yeah.
Y'all heard that?
Yeah.
Dr. Silkworth, when he asked the question, because Dr. Silkworth only asked one question.
Yeah.
There's only one question mark in the whole doctor's opinion, and it's what is the solution? And one of the answers he gave us is of a guy who had a hemorrhagic, he was really messed up. He was in bad shape. But once he became sold on the ideas in his book, Dr. Silkworth said the man came to see him a year later and he hardly recognized the man. Y'all heard?
Right.
He had a profound personality change. Now, he was talking about the alcoholic who could not afford private treatment, right? The question can come in, well, what about the alcoholic who can afford private treatment? One of them, what we just finished reading about, was Roland Hazard. Roland Hazard went to Carl Jung, and he could afford private treatment. Yet the solution for Roland Hazard was the same as for these who couldn't afford private treatment, which was an entire psychic change. Turn to page 39. I'm hoping I got the right page. Y'all got that? Fred. Y'all see that word, Fred?
Yes, Fred.
Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. I don't know what's so comical about Fred, but every time I read about it, I laugh about it. You know, Fred's story is the only story that they tell us is most instructive. You heard that? They tell us Fred's story is most instructive. That means there's a lot of lessons, great lessons in Fred's story. Anyway, Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearances, he is stable. He is a stable, well-balanced individual. Yet, he is an alcoholic. Wow. So with all of Fred's attractive personality, Fred needed a personality change. Y'all heard that? Yeah. No matter how great my personality is, when I come up here like Fred, I needed a personality change. All right. Now up on the board, we done put in some areas of this personality and what they're really trying to tell us. Now, this thing we got called personality defects, I got that written up here. Y'all see personality? All right. They got a thing called personality defects. Some people use character defects, right? But Bill, when Bill before the page 1 to the second edition, I think, Bill used personality defects. We use character defects in our step work, right? Yeah. But when he was being informed, when he was informing us about what Ebby told him, one of the requirements was personality defects, to look at personality defects. So that word comes up in, I think, the 12 and 12. Remember, this is not only a topic about transformational personality change, it's also a progression in understanding. All right? Now, on personality defects, on page 48 in the 12 and 12, this is what they tell us. What page is it?
48.
Y'all see, now let's ponder.
Yeah.
Now let's ponder the need for a list of the more glaring personality defects all of us have in varying degrees. To those having religious training, such a list would set forth serious violations of moral principles. Some others would think of this list as defects of character. Well, how you feeling? Long time no see. Him. What's your name again?
Mark.
What?
Mark.
Mark. And Cheryl. Sharon, yeah. Okay. I know I haven't seen you in a good while. You know, I'll do that when I see somebody, you know, I'll do that. Some people say, well, why you do that? I don't know. I just do it. He said, some others will think of this list as defects of character. Still others will call it an index of maladjustment. You notice how they're giving it all these different terminologies?
Yeah.
Some will become quite annoyed if there's talk about immorality, let alone sin. But all who are in the least reasonable will agree upon one point. But now you got to be at the least reasonable in order to agree on this one point. That there's plenty wrong with us alcoholics, about which plenty will have to be done if we are to experience sobriety, progress, and any real ability to cope with life. To avoid falling into confusion. Remember they made that mistake the first time, right? He said to avoid falling into confusion over names these defects should be called, let's take a universally recognized list of major human failures. The 7 deadly sins of pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. Wow. It is not by accident that pride heads the procession. For pride, leading to self-justification and always spurred by conscious or unconscious fears, is the basic bringer of most human difficulties. The chief block to true progress. Pride lures us into making demands upon ourselves or upon others which cannot be met without perverting or misusing our God-given instincts. When the satisfaction of our instincts for sex, security, and society becomes the sole object of our lives, then pride steps in to justify our excesses. Before I came into this program, I didn't know that at all. I learned that in here. Then, page 51. On page 51. Is the 12 and 12.
What is sloth?
Sloth is laziness. That means I don't do nothing if I ain't got to do it. I hardly get up. I sure ain't gonna make a meeting. And everything that I want to do, I'm gonna put off till tomorrow.
Thank you.
You know, some people just say tomorrow don't never come. Because when the time tomorrow comes, it's today. You know what I'm saying? So I'm constantly putting it off. Sloth. This type of sloth is different from just plain laziness. That's why they spell differently. Because they got different meanings. This sloth is called a sin. Laziness is not called a sin, right or wrong. But this sloth in this book is referred to as a sin. So it's a deeper form of sloth. So I could share an experience, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm going to share it.
Go ahead, Go ahead.
I remember being in prison. Being in prison. A guy came in the prison. And y'all know when a person is in prison that you don't go nowhere. You locked up. That means you don't be with your wife. You don't see what the family's doing. You don't know nothing about the outside world, right? Unless you keep in contact like some of us did. But one guy came in, he was so distraught. He was wondering what his wife was doing. He'd hardly eat. He wouldn't take a shower. He starts stinking. But you know, in prison, we all like in this room, right? 50 of us, all in this room, right? I mean, if your stinking going to affect all of us, right? So we grabbed him and threw him in the shower, got a brush and scrubbed him down. That's slothful. That's what I want to share. That's sinful. Anyway, where we was at? Page 51. Page 51. At the bottom of the page. But all alcoholics, y'all see that? Who have drunk themselves out of jobs, family, and friends will need to cross-examine themselves ruthlessly. Not just cross-examine yourself. Ruthlessly to determine how their own personality defects have thus demolished their security.
Wow.
And that's what we had to do. So it's personality change via the steps of progression and understanding. We notice what happened in the transformational sudden spectacular upheaval, but not mentioning the steps. So as the big book goes on, and the 12 and 12 itself, which is a progression in understanding, because the purpose of the 12 and 12 is to broaden and deepen the understanding of the steps. So in that sense, the 12 and 12 is itself the best interpreter of a progression of understanding as far as what we've been given. Y'all heard?
Yes.
That's why I'm constantly referring to it. That's not why I'm not using my own words. I'm using that because the 12 and 12 is the best interpreter of a progression in understanding, because that's exactly what it is. Now, it talks about personality flaws. That's written? Yeah. It's on page 56. 56. And these things are being addressed as a result of going through the different steps. That's what the 12 and 12 is telling us. You say, y'all see this practice? This practice of admitting one's defects to another person is, of course, very ancient. It has been validated in every century, and it characterizes the lives of all spiritually centered and truly religious people. But today, religion is by no means the sole advocate of this saving principle. Psychiatrists and psychologists point out the deep need every human being has for practical insight and knowledge of his own personality flaws, and for a discussion of them with an understanding and trustworthy person. so far as alcoholics are concerned, it would go even further. Most of us would declare that without a fearless admission of our defects to another human being, we could not stay sober. Would that be right or wrong?
Right.
One of the things that prevented me from taking the 5th step was I didn't want people to know how dirty and low down I really was. I didn't want God to know it, let alone another human being.
You know all of it.
It seems plain that the grace of God will not enter to expel our destruction obsessions until we are willing to try this. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Now they talk about personality traits. Page 81 in the 12 and 12. Y'all got that at the top of that page?
Yes, such growth.
Such gross behavior, such gross thinking. Now, that's what I like about, I can get corrected. That's what you're supposed to do. Such gross misbehavior is not by any means a full catalog of the harms we do. Let us think of some of the subtler ones, which can sometimes be quite as damaging. Suppose that in our family lives, we happen to be miserly. It's easy to be misconstrued with miserly, right?
Yeah.
But miserly, y'all know what miserly means, right? Huh?
No, I don't.
Stingy.
Stingy.
Stingy. Suppose that in our family lives, we happen to be miserly, irresponsible, callous, or cold. Suppose that we are irritable, critical, impatient, and humorless. Suppose we lavish attention upon one member of the family and neglect the others. What happens when we try to dominate the whole family? Either by a rule of iron or by a constant outpouring of minute directions for just how their lives should be lived from hour to hour. What happens when we wallow in depression? Self-pity oozing like pus. Oozing. That's what pus does. Y'all familiar with pus? Pus oozes, Spiritually, that's what it is. What happens when we wallow in depression? Self-pity oozing from every pore and inflict that upon those about us. Who wants that kind of stuff on them? Such a roster of harms done others, the kind that makes daily living with us as practicing alcohol is difficult and often unbearable, could be extended almost indefinitely. When we take such personality traits as these into shop, office, and the society, we then moved out from the home. Now we're going into the shop, the society of our fellows. They can do damage almost as extensive as that we have caused at home. That's one of the reasons why the big book told us there are more important demonstrations of these principles lies ahead in our respective homes and on our jobs. Y'all heard that?
Yeah.
They say quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles solve all my problems. That's quite as important. But see, a more important demonstration, not talking, of these principles lies ahead in our home. It ain't about me telling Susan, since I'm righteous, you got to do everything I say and when I say it. Because I have had a spiritual awakening. It ain't about, it's demonstrating it. Y'all heard me?
Yeah.
It's living it. That's what...
Keep coming back.
So, having carefully surveyed this whole area of human relations and having decided exactly what personality traits in us injured and disturbed others, we can now commence to ransack memory for the people to whom we have given offense. To put a finger, that's step 8, ain't it?
Yeah.
We're still moving through the steps. Transformational personality change via the steps as we're moving through the steps. To put a finger on the nearby and most deeply damaged one shouldn't be hard to do. Then as year by year we walk back through our lives as far as memory will reach, we shall be bound to construct a long list of people who have to some extent or other been affected. Y'all see that?
Yeah.
That's way in 8. That's as I'm going through this process. Now, they got this other word, and I don't want to miss nothing. And I got something up here to make sure I don't start rambling. Y'all heard that?
Yeah.
Y'all ever heard of alcoholic ramble? Huh?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you might not told him nothing. A person could be sharing in a room. You might not tell him anything or her anything, but has a thought ever come to your mind? They just ramble.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all ever done that?
Yeah.
Well, I make sure I don't just ramble. We got this word, transformed. Is it up here? Yeah, right here. See what we're dealing with is a transformational, we're dealing with a transformational, transformation. What?
Yeah. I got it.
That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a transformational, transformation. That's exactly what we're dealing with. Some of us don't call it that. Remember what they were saying? He might call it this, he might call it that, he might call it this. But once you look at the words that they've used in this book, that's exactly what they're talking about.
Can you say that again? Transformational.
This is what we're dealing with. And what we're really seeking is a transformational, transformation.
Okay.
Sound like y'all got to understand. I never finished 8th grade. All right, let's get that out the way. For some of them say, "Well, what? He's a historical professor or something." No, I never finished 8th grade. I had to study this book. Y'all heard me? All right. So the word transform appears on page 28,
Big book.
12 and 12. Page 28. Y'all can see at the top, relieved of the alcoholic obsession, their lives unaccountably transformed. They came to believe in a higher power, and most of them began to talk of God. That's the person who can call the group his power, his higher power. But after he stays in here for a while, and he see other people, relieved of the alcoholic obsession, their lives unaccountably transformed with no explanation that they can intelligently give themselves. They came to believe in a higher power, and most of them began to talk of God. And that includes atheists and agnostics. Y'all heard that?
Yeah.
Page 75 in the 12 and 12. It starts off on 74. That this improved perception, y'all see that?
Yeah.
This improved perception of humility. Now we're in 7, right? Step 7. Starts another revolutionary change in our outlook. Our eyes begin to open to the immense values which have come straight out of painful ego puncturing. Until now, our lives have been largely devoted to running from pain and problems. We fled from them as from a plague. We never wanted to deal with the fact of suffering. Escape via the bottle was always our solution. Character building through suffering might be all right for saints, but it certainly didn't appeal to us. That's what they tell you.
Wow.
Then, in AA, we looked and listened Everywhere we saw failure and misery transformed by humility into priceless assets. That's what they say. That's on page 75. On page 107. We got to start on 106, the bottom paragraph. Y'all see that?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe there are as many definitions of spiritual awakening as there are people who have had them. But certainly, each genuine one has something in common with all the others. In other words, if both of us, or all of us, have had a genuine spiritual awakening, we're going to all have something in common. That's what they're telling us, right? If you done had one and I done had one, and we don't have anything in common, one of us has not had a genuine spiritual awakening. Y'all heard?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be in common. He said, and these things which they have in common are not too hard to understand. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. He has been set on a path which tells him he is really going somewhere. That life is not dead. No, that life is not a dead end and not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, he has been transformed. Y'all ever heard this old saying a long time ago? Be ye not conformed, but be ye transformed. Y'all ever heard that?
Yeah.
Well, even though they was telling me that, I didn't know how to get it. Alcoholics Anonymous showed me how to get it. Y'all heard? They told me that all my life, but I never knew how to do it. So, he said in a very real sense, he has been transformed. Now, A's manner of making ready to receive this gift lies in the practice of the 12 steps in our program. So let's consider briefly what we have been trying to do up to this point. Now, we're going to go through what brought about this transformation in the words of the founder himself. How did we go, and it's a progression in understanding and effectiveness, because in the big book, on page 30, you got step 1, right?
Right.
They said this is the first step in recovery.
Yes, sir.
Nothing else is mentioned about step 1, right?
Yeah.
In the 12 and 12, Bill comes in with a whole chapter on step 1. When Bill comes with the 12 and 12, he don't come in there telling his story like he told it in the big book. The first thing he says is step 1. And after that, step 2. Y'all heard that? Yeah. So the 12 and 12 is like step 2. Step 2 in the big book is not even mentioned by name. It's the only step that's not mentioned by name. Am I right or wrong?
Right.
But in the 12 and 12, Bill comes with a whole chapter on step 2. Right? Step 6 and step 7 on page 69 in the textbook. If he mentioned it so brief, he don't tell you the beginning of 7, he tells you the end of 7 by looking at 6. And if you're traveling down a highway and step 6 and 7 is on the side, if you sneeze, you'll miss it. Y'all heard that? But in the 12 and 12 he comes and he gives us a whole chapter on step 6 and step 7. Y'all heard that?
Yeah.
And even in step 8, there's no great elaboration on step 8 in the big book. Not a great one, because he said let's look at steps 8 and 9. But he came in the 12 and 12 and he elaborated. Now let's go through what actually happened and how they showed us how we evolved in this progression in understanding of these steps. This is what they say. And I'm getting ready to close. Step 1 showed us an amazing paradox. Y'all see that on page 107? We found that we were totally unable to be rid of the alcoholic obsession until we first admitted that we were powerless over it. In step 2, we saw that since we could not restore ourselves to sanity, some higher power must necessarily do so if we were to survive. Consequently, in step 3, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. For the time being, we who were atheists or agnostic discovered that our own group, or AA as a whole, would suffice as a higher power. Beginning with step 4, we commenced to search out the things in ourselves which had brought us to physical, moral, and spiritual bankruptcy. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory. Looking at step 5, we decided that an inventory taken alone wouldn't be enough. We knew we would have to quit the deadly business of living alone with our conflicts and in honesty confide these to God and to another human being. At step 6, many of us balked for the practical reason that we did not wish to have all our defects of character removed because we still love some of them too much.
Yes, sir.
Yet we knew we had to make a settlement with the fundamental principle of step 6. So we decided that while we still had some flaws of character that we could not yet relinquish, we ought nevertheless to quit our stubborn rebellious hanging on to them. We said to ourselves, this I cannot do today, perhaps, but I can stop crying out, no, never. Then in step 7, we humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings such as He could or would under the circumstances of the day we asked. In step 8, we continued our house cleaning, for we saw that we were not only in conflict with ourselves, but also with people and situations in the world in which we live. We had to begin to make our peace, and so we listened to people we had harmed and became willing to set things right. We followed this up in step 9 by making direct amends to those concerned, except when it would injure them or other people. By this time, at step 10, we had begun to get a basis for daily living. And we keenly realized that we would need to continue taking personal inventory, and that when we were in the wrong, we ought to admit it promptly. In step 11, we saw that if a higher power had restored us to sanity and had enabled us to live with some peace of mind in a sorely troubled world, then such a higher power would be worth knowing better by as direct contact as possible. The persistent use of meditation and prayer, we found, did open a channel so that where there had been a trickle, there now was a river, which led to sure power and safeguarding from God as we were increasingly better able to understand Him. So practicing these steps, we had a spiritual awakening, about which finally there was no question. Looking at those who were only beginning and still doubted themselves, the rest of us were able to see the change setting in. From great numbers of such experiences, we could predict that the doubter, who still claimed that he hadn't got the spiritual angle, and who still considered his well-loved AA group the higher power, would presently love God and call Him by name. Now I'd ask this question. Now what about the rest of the 12th step? Remember we was talking about a transformation, right?
Right.
Well, this transformation does not sit still. It evolves. It translates. Y'all heard?
Yeah.
He said, what about the rest of the 12th step? The wonderful energy it releases and the eager action by which it carries our message to the next suffering alcoholic. And which finally translates the 12 steps into action upon... No, let me read this again.
Okay.
The wonderful energy it releases and the eager action by which it carries our message to the next suffering alcoholic, and which finally translates the 12 steps into action upon all our affairs, is the payoff, the magnificent reality of Alcoholics Anonymous. These steps, this transformation has now translated, and it's going to get further. It will transcend I don't think we're going to have enough time to get into that part of it, but I'm going to wrap this up. It said, translated into the magnificent reality called Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is what happens with that. Because this thing transcends. On page 31 in the 12 and 12, you'll see how it didn't just translate, it transcended. And transcend really is a powerful word when you really look it up. On page 31, this is what they tell us. I mean, the 12 and 12, right?
Yeah, right.
Bottom paragraph.
Page 31. We know when encountered,
Yes, about.
when we encountered AA, the fallacy of our defiance was revealed. At no time had we asked what God's will was for us. Instead, we had been telling him what it ought to be. No man we saw could believe in God and defy him too. Belief meant reliance, not defiance. In AA, we saw the fruits of this belief, men and women spared from alcohol's final catastrophe. We saw them meet and transcend their other pains and trials. Y'all see that?
Yes.
We saw them meet and transcend their other. Is another example of transcendence is when Bill and Bob in the first 100 was working with others so that they could stay sober. And then when they found out the joy that they was getting, the feeling and the happiness transcended. It made it secondary. And you see, the transcend means to rise above and beyond the ordinary or the material world. So they transcended. Alcoholics Anonymous, a magnificent payoff is how alcohol or these 12 steps translates. And then it transcends. Now, y'all know when a person gets a religious experience or they get a spiritual awakening, a genuine one, or any kind really, the first thing they want to do is go tell it on the mountain. Right? Right or wrong, y'all?
Yeah.
That's the first thing that they want to do. I want to make sure that I got this right. I'm looking for a tradition.
Attraction.
All right. Look, the first thing they want to do is go tell it on the mountain, right? Over the hills and everywhere. You know, I want to spread the news. I mean, think about it. It happened to Bob and Bill, didn't it? Yeah, it was Bob who told Bill, you know we got to keep spiritual active. It was at Bob's suggestion that they went to the hospital and got them a drink. Because Bob said, you know we got to keep spiritual active. But these people who were so gung-ho with what they had got and the new awakening and the good feeling that they had, I'm going to show you how overboard they went. Turn your book to page 155 in the 12 and 12. Y'all got it?
Yes, sir.
The moment we saw that we had an answer for alcoholism, it was reasonable, or so it seemed at the time, for us to feel that we might have the answer to a lot of other things. Y'all heard that? The AA groups, many thought, could go into business, might finance any enterprise, whatever, in the total field of alcoholism. In fact, we felt duty-bound to throw the whole weight of the AA name behind any meritorious cause. Ain't that people who then had a good awakening? They really want to share this stuff, don't they? They say, here are some of the things we dreamed. Hospitals didn't like alcoholics, so we thought we'd build a hospital chain of our own. People needed to be told what alcoholism was, so we'd educate the public. Even rewrite school and medical textbooks. Oh, they were serious. These people were serious. They said we'd gather up all derelicts from skid rows, sort out those who could get well, and make it possible for the rest to earn their livelihood in a kind of quarantine confinement.
Oh, man.
Maybe these places would make large sums of money to carry on our other good works. We seriously thought of rewriting the laws of the land and having it declared that alcoholics are just sick people. Declared. No more would they be jailed. Judges would parole them into our custody. We'd spill AA into the dark regions of dope addiction and criminality. We'd form groups of depressive and paranoid folks. The deeper the neurosis, the better we like it. It stood to reason that if alcoholism could be licked, so could any problem. It occurred to us that we could take what we had into the factories and cause laborers and capitalists to love each other. Y'all remember when laborers and capitalists fighting and warring? Well, we going to bring it to them and they're going to make them love each other. Our uncompromising honesty might soon clean up politics. Y'all heard that? Said, with one arm around the shoulder of religion and the other around the shoulder of medicine, we'd resolve their differences.
Wow.
We're going to solve the world's religious problems. That's what they tell us. Having learned to live so happily, we'd show everybody else how. Why? We thought our Society of Alcoholics Anonymous might prove to be the spearhead of a new spiritual advance. We might transform the world. That's where this word comes from. Transform. You heard that? So most of what I have said, and I hope it's been helpful, most of what I have said did not come from me.
No, sir.
Y'all saw that, right? It came from the textbook. They told us in step 10 that we had to grow in understanding and effectiveness, right? The 12 and 12 came along and showed us how to do that. Now, if y'all would bow your head for a minute in a moment of silence. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And thank you all very much, and I hope it's been helpful. Now y'all go